Howdy. So let's talk about why monopolies exist. The key to understanding how monopolies can persist and enjoy all that fat monopoly profit is to understand their barriers to entry. Above normal profits will not persist in the long run unless there is something keeping new firms out of the industry. So barriers to entry are essential. How do you create a barrier to entry? How does society feel about these barriers to entry? Let's take a look at all the different barriers to entry. Here are a few of the most important. If you control natural resources or inputs, like De Beers diamonds, if you have increasing returns to scale or economies of scale that make it cheaper for you to be bigger, if you have a superior technology, if you have a protection by the government, including patents and copyrights. These all are very effective barriers to entry. You ever bought a diamond or considered buying a diamond? De Beers Diamond Company used to own the majority of diamond mines in the world, effectively keeping new firms out of the diamond business. Things have changed, and it's not quite the case anymore, although they still have quite a big chunk of the share. Another source of barriers to entry for monopoly is the idea of increasing returns to scale, related to the idea of economies of scale. So economies of scale are just when the average cost of production falls as production levels rise. So a natural monopoly is when you have large amounts of economies of scale, so much so that it only makes sense for there to be one large hydroelectric power producing facility here at Hoover Dam. It doesn't make sense for a bunch of little firms to outlay this gigantic cost for a small amount of water. It only makes sense if it's one large firm serving everybody. For those of you who like to see this in pictures, aka graphs, here's what it looks like. Average costs drop, drop, drop. If the market is about this big, the relevant output range, your average costs are dropping the whole time all the way up to the amount of the market that you're serving. So if it were smaller and each firm produced less of the market, you'd have much higher cost. But because there's just one firm and they're producing it all for the market, they get to be in a lower point of their average total cost curve. You might wonder what Apple's monopoly source is. What's the barrier to entry keeping Apple firmly in place of power in its industry? If you've got, as Apple certainly once did and maybe still does, a technological advantage over potential competitors, you can establish and keep other firms at bay. And we should say something here about what we call network externalities, or a specific type of good or service where the value rises as more people use the same platform. So you can think about Spotify, Facebook, TikTok, any number of social media are probably really good examples of network externalities. And that means it really only makes sense to have one firm serving everybody. Everyone's worse off if there's a bunch of small firms and we aren't able to share music with each other because we're all on different platforms. So social media you can think of as sort of naturally a monopoly situation because of the network externalities. And finally, sometimes the government sees fit to protect and create monopolies. For instance, if you're a pharmaceutical and you have developed a new painkiller, the government will give you often a 20-year patent. So you have the exclusive rights to the stream of profits from that invention. And it should be obvious why patents exist. It is to protect the profit and therefore to protect the innovation work of new discoveries. A copyright is similar in that it ensures the profits from and therefore gives an incentive to do more of the work of creation. So the government can create barriers to entry as well. It's important to note that there are losers and winners from this. So while we understand it to be a good idea for the profit for firms and for innovation in general, some wonder if it goes too far. For instance, Should we be able to patent seeds? What do you think?